Hi everyone, this is Ricky Spencer and welcome to another episode of the Sociology of Media Voices series. Today we are very fortunate to have Dr. Andrew Leigh, who is the Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities and Treasury, and of course the federal member for Fenner in the ACT. Prior to being elected in 2010, Andrew was a Professor of Economics at the Australian National University. He holds a PhD in Public Policy from Harvard, having graduated from the University of Sydney with first-class honours in Arts and Law. Andrew is a past recipient of the Economic Society of Australia's Young Economist Award and a Fellow of the Australian Academy of Social Sciences. His books include Disconnected, Battlers and Billionaires, The Stories of Inequality in Australia, published in 2013, The Economics of Just About Everything, 2014, The Luck of Politics, 2015, Choosing Openness, Why Global Engagement is Best for Australia. And I could go on, there's so many we will put there. Dr. Andrew Leigh, thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your ideas. Why is volunteerism important in Australia, especially today and in the future?
Well, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast, Ricky, and can I acknowledge the Ngunnawal owners from whose lands I'm joining you today. Volunteering is an essential way in which humans connect with one another. The original founder of one of Australia's overseas aid volunteering programs, Herb Feith, who was a close friend of our family, used to say that volunteering is symbolic of human equality. Herb's ideal form of volunteering was to meet people where they're at. And so he set up a program of volunteering in the newly formed nation of Indonesia, in which Australians would go overseas and work alongside local Indonesian staff in ministries, earning exactly the same wage that they would earn. But whether you've got volunteering here through Clean Up Australia, whether it's volunteering to improve a local arts organisation, whether it's volunteering at a little athletics game, or whether it's volunteering to help out at a local soup kitchen, it's about connecting Australia. And the reason that I'm really passionate about this, Ricky, is because I've looked at the trends in social connectedness in Australia and they're going the wrong way. Over the last generation, we've become less likely to join groups, less likely to give to charity, less likely to play and organise sport, or less likely to attend a religious service. And volunteering too has waned. So I'm really keen to kickstart a civic renaissance, and volunteering's at the heart of that.
And this is what we're hoping to do with My Passion. Now, last week I was fortunate enough to attend the Australian Volunteers Conference, and we had wonderful speech that you helped shape the space for launching the 2023 to 2030s action plan. One of the things that was mentioned, and perhaps to explain to our audience, the impact of COVID and how COVID has sort of positioned us in a way that we have to now do something. What has been the impact of COVID on volunteering in Australia?
I think we're still trying to figure out exactly how COVID shaped volunteering. And one of the things I really like about the action plan is its emphasis on evidence. We need to do more deep dives into specific sectors to see what happened. But the story that I hear anecdotally from many of the organisations in my electorate in the north of Canberra is that people just got out of the habit of volunteering. And some were fearful, even as COVID waned, to come back into volunteering. Organisations that have found it most difficult to get new volunteers are those that relied on an older volunteer workforce. Take Meals on Wheels, for example. They don't just serve an older clientele, they tend to be served by an older group of volunteers. So many of the really interesting, innovative programs that Meals on Wheels was doing pre-pandemic, such as dietary programs that had some volunteers joining the client to eat a meal together, have fallen into abeyance because that organisation just hasn't been able to get enough volunteers to serve its basic needs.
One of the passions for me is that how can we, who are privileged enough to be in spaces where we, in education and academia, how can we take along and embrace volunteerism? And for me as a sociologist, I can't think of one day I can't be without my volunteering. I love my volunteering because for me, it connects me to community, but also connects me to research. From your perspective as someone in the government, do you see the value of people in academia and researchers forming more closer relationships with volunteering organisations and working with them to really build community capacity building?
Absolutely. I disagree with the view that says that where you see voluntary organisations, that's in some sense a failure of government. It's wrong to regard volunteer organisations as stepping in only when government's unable to act. In many organisations, it would be strange to have government stepping up. Imagine Little Athletics on the weekend, in which everyone who was staffing the long jump pit was a paid government worker, or community theatre, in which everyone was earning a wage. Volunteering helps engage us and allows people to give something back to the community. Frankly, we're nicer when we do it. When my three little boys returned from an hour or two of picking up garbage for Clean Up Australia Day, they're nicer than they would be if they'd spent that same time playing Minecraft on their iPads. And I suspect their parents are nicer too as a result of the experience. So there's that thing called the helper's high, the benefit that we get from giving back to the community, which shouldn't be underrated here.
And I think one of the things that I was doing in the class on the weekend, I was talking to some students and I was saying that how there was this misconception years ago, only a certain person will volunteer from a certain class. And I would love to have your view on this. Why is it something of value to all people from all walks of life, how it's important for volunteers to come together?
It's a fundamental connector. Those who volunteer are more likely to know people who are in a different social class, of a different ethnicity, of a different sexuality from themselves. It's an opportunity to get to know a wider spectrum of society. And I think it's particularly a case for progressive activists that volunteering can be a way of connecting yourself to the stories of the most vulnerable. I chatted with some of the staff that run the Vinnie's van around Canberra about what they're experiencing. And they were telling me that there's a real frustration among some of the clients they serve about not being able to get a good sleeping bag. So we did a sleeping bag drive with one of the local TV stations to try and get more bags out there to help people. You talk to people and you get a sense of their stories. I remember volunteering on a Christmas lunch one day, and my kids and I got chatting to a bloke who's lived in the Canberra bush for the last couple of years. He's got his own secret location, which is a walk away from the bus stop that he's at, and that's how he lives his life. And to get a sense of him and his experience is to get a broader sense of the human condition, as well as the challenges of alleviating poverty in Australia.
And one of the things that I remember last year, I think it was, when I attended in Victoria, they had the volunteer awards ceremony. Can you sort of explain to people how in all states there is a recognition too for people who participate? Because I feel that we all give when we're volunteers, but I would never feel like I want the accolade, but yet it's such a beautiful thing to come together and see what other people are doing when we have award ceremonies in all the states.
It certainly is, Ricky. And I know those award ceremonies are a chance for people to hear the stories of some of our extraordinary volunteers. And that's why it's worth putting yourself or someone else forward, because those stories can so powerfully help to inspire others. And there's also the Australian Honours, and I'd like to see more volunteers being recognised on the King's Birthday holiday and Australia Day for their work in the local community. I met a couple who had been foster parents to literally hundreds of children. And I found it difficult to talk with them without getting a lump in my throat. Their contribution to society was so remarkable. And that, again, serves to make you think to yourself, well, what is it that I can do better to serve my local community?
And as you may know, Dr. Lee, one of my passions is on, action making. So what can people do listening today say, okay, yeah, I want to volunteer? How do they go about it? Let's sort of put it out there for people. What sort of you can recommend?
The best way is to get online, look at the volunteer opportunities there. When Nick, Terrell and I wrote Reconnected, we estimated that Australia had more volunteer online matching engines per capita than any other country in the world. There's Go Volunteer, there's Seek Volunteer. There's a whole range of platforms where people can connect up with opportunities. There's chances for online volunteering. You can volunteer to help out the National Museum or to the National Library. And there's pure episodic volunteering. So if you've only got a chance to do a one-off activity, you can find something that will fit you as well. And if you've got professional skills, there's organisations out there who will make use of those skills. So if you're a talented accountant, then we won't. There's organisations that won't just have you painting a fence. They'll have you using your accounting skills to provide crucial support to one of Australia's great charities.
I guess as we wrap up, what sort of message would you like to give to the young people listening, especially those in high schools who aren't sure about careers? What could volunteerism give for them in terms of an understanding and future choices?
I began talking about Herb Feith, who said that volunteer is symbolic of human equality. And that makes Herb sound sort of very worthy, a bit of a sort of Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela kind of figure. But he was anything but. He loved volunteering. He loved the chance to see new countries and to hear new stories. And that's the hidden gem of volunteering, that it is really deeply fun. You'll come away from stories, with stories and anecdotes. You'll come away with a better understanding of your fellow human being. You'll meet interesting people. You might, if you're a young person looking for love, volunteering is a great way of finding it. But if you just want to give something back to your community and be able to close your eyes at the end of the night with the knowledge that you've made the world a better place, it's hard to think of a better way of doing that than through volunteering.
Well, thank you, Dr. Andrew Leigh, for really sort of highlighting the importance of volunteering. I just want to add my final, whether you're someone like me living with a disability, whatever intersectionality you represent, you are welcomed in volunteering. There's a space for you. And it just gives that opportunity for people who may have never met somebody like yourself to connect with you and have that stories, you sharing the stories. And it's through the sharing of stories that we can rebuild our communities of care, as I call it, and to really shift the thinking that, the governments have to do everything. We can collectively as a communities and society work together to rebuild our country and, foster that element that we'll all look after each other. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Leigh.
That's a really powerful way to close things, Ricky. Thank you so much.